All right, here we are in COVID-19 lockdown on April or May of 2020, and I was making some gnocchi one time, homemade gnocchi, and was posting it up on social media, got some interest, and some people wanted to know how to do it. So I'm making a video. This will be my first instructional video. I don't know if I'll put it up on YouTube, or if I do, though. I'm no videographer, obviously, so this probably won't be production level quality, but here are the steps for the most part. I'm going to tilt the camera down so that you can see what I'm doing here on the workspace, so you won't really see much of me. But in general, prep time, I've already baked the russet potatoes. Again, this is potato gnocchi, not ricotta. I've baked the potatoes for an hour and a half. So they're about to come out now, and basically we'll start from there. General tools, I have a potato ricer here, which is pretty helpful. If you have that, that's ideal. If not, you can just use any other means to mash the potatoes. Spoons, forks, nothing crazy here. Flour, in terms of ingredients, you need flour, a couple of eggs, russet potatoes, salt, pepper, and some more russet as well. Yield, I have about 2 pounds of potatoes, and that yields about, 100 gnocchi maybe. I'm not really great with the serving sizes, but okay, here we go. So like I said, the gnocchi is just coming out of the oven now, the potatoes are just coming out of the oven now, and you have to kind of do this while it's still hot, and the potatoes are kind of malleable, I guess. It's not the right word, but you know what I mean. You basically want to cut, again, 2 pounds of potatoes. I bake them for an hour and a half at 350 degrees. You want to basically cook them until you can just drive a butter knife through them without any resistance, really. So I'm going to get those out. So here they are, and like I said, you kind of want to do this while they're still hot, or not kind of, you do. You can let them cool down a little bit, but what I do is I normally will just use an oven mitt and kind of do it that way. So first step, I just kind of oven mitt this. What I do is I'll cut them in half, the potatoes. The skin is pretty, a little tough, just because it's crispy now at this point. And then what I'll do is grab a half, and I'll basically scoop out the potatoes, or the potato insides here, and it comes out pretty easily, with a spoon. You obviously don't want any of the potato skin here. So we'll do that. And then I'm just discarding the peel or the skins. You could use them for something else if you want. Obviously, I've washed my hands in all these cutting board areas. Now, the next step you're going to see, there's a couple different ways you could cook the potatoes. You don't have to bake them. I prefer to bake them. You could boil them. You could microwave them. When you go to the part of adding flour, the method you use to cook them is going to dictate how much flour you need. So, basically, the flour you're adding is going to be contingent on how much water was soaked up by these potatoes during the cooking process. If you boil it, there's a lot of water being soaked up. If you bake them, it's not as much. So we'll use less flour in this process because I baked them. If you boiled them, you would use significantly more flour. So a lot of times you'll see on online recipes that the flour ingredient amount varies greatly. And that's the reason why, is because, you know, they don't always tell you the means, you know, 2 cups of flour if you bake it, 5 cups if you boiled it, you know. I'm just making those numbers up. It'll vary based on how many potatoes you use. Okay, so now here we are. They're pretty hot, obviously, still. And I'm just going to now run them through the ricer. You want to get this kind of you want the potatoes as finely mashed as you can get them, pretty much. Alright, so this is the potatoes mashed up. Got a skin there. Alright. Alright, so that's that. Now you have a bunch of mashed potatoes. What you want to do is just kind of make a little ring with the potatoes with the hole in the middle, a hole in the middle. Hopefully you can see that in this video. And get some flour. Okay, so I have in this bowl 2 eggs. 2 large eggs. Again, we have, this is for 2 pounds of potatoes, is kind of how you derive the ingredient count based on the weight of the potatoes. So I'm just going to pour the egg mixture here in the middle of the hole. Eggs are obviously beaten. Okay. And then you want to do about 2 teaspoons of salt. Nothing I really do is ever measured all that precisely. 1. There's 2. Freshly ground pepper. Why not? Pinch or so. And then for the 2 pounds, I like to start with between 1.5 and 2 cups of flour. And you're just gonna kind of put it around here like this. 1, and we'll go with about a little bit less than a 2nd cup here. We'll call it 1 2/3 or 1 3/4. Just kind of cover it. Again, hopefully you can see this. There's your quality production, right? Okay, so now I'm going to grab a fork now and just kind of slowly pull in the outer sides of the ring into the egg and just mix it with the fork to start. This is all, again, when the potato is still pretty warm. You don't want to do this when it's cold. And after a while, you'll eventually start to get a little bit of a kind of a dough consistency. I'm sure there's 100 other ways you could do this. This is just the way that I do it. And also when you're doing this with the fork, it helps to continue to mash any like larger chunks, which usually if you're using a ricer you're not going to have, but if you did manually mash this, you can always end up with some bigger chunks, and you don't really want that because then you've got a, you know, more of a chunky gnocchi than a good consistency. Now flour is always going to be, like I said, with the way that how much water was absorbed by the potato, but also just in general, I mean, consistency preferences kind of range. So as you're making this dough, you're going to need to kind of play with the flour. There's never a exact flour amount. You'll be dusting the board along the way, so that will soak up more of the flour, and you just never have a, whatever the number is that you hear on the recipe, it's going to be more than that most likely. You can already tell that we don't have enough flour here already, because it's, you know, you'll get to a point where you'll figure it out. You just keep adding a little bit at a time. Obviously you can add more, but you can't take out. So, and we're getting to the point now where I can just get in there and knead this with my hands. So like I talked about in the beginning, prep time, you're looking at about at least an hour and a half. If you're baking the potatoes, you could boil them a lot quicker. I don't know what the boiling time is for the potatoes. I have never done it that way. Like I said, I prefer to bake it, so whatever it normally takes to boil a potato. I'm sure it's less than an hour and a half though. So you could do that. And then time to actually make the gnocchi, whatever the time of this video is, but you know, the longest portion of the process is not making the dough, it's cutting out the individual pieces of gnocchi and shaping them and everything. So depending on how much you make, that can take a while. So alright, we've got you know, the dough's a pretty good consistency here, pretty decent thickness. You can kind of tell it's still a little bit sticky, so I'm going to add more flour again. Just, you know, we might be up to 2 cups now, maybe a little bit more, but so all right, that's pretty good. What I do then is I basically cut it into smaller pieces first. And again, you got the inside of the potato here, so now this is going to need more flour. So you're continuously adding more flour without even really measuring it. So cut these into, you know, 8 pieces or so. And then I'll just kind of make them into a little ball here. And what we're going to do, let me get a new knife. Okay, then we're just going to roll these into little cylindrical snakes. You know, again, the kind of size here is a preference thing. I usually start out small, but as I realize how long it's taking to do them so small, I'll make them larger. So, you know, I don't know, half an inch here maybe in diameter. Not even. And then basically you're going to cut them down with just a butter knife. Cut them into these little inch piece pillows. And what I'll do is a couple of little logs here at a time. Now, some people might just say, okay, that's good from here, and start to form them. You don't even have to, I mean, that's it. You don't even have to do anything else, really. There's a gnocchi. Or a gnocco, really. But what I like to do is I'll take the pieces then and I'll re-roll them into little balls. Now this takes a lot, obviously you're adding a ton of time here to do this for all of these, but I find it easier to make a better form once you do this. So what I mean by that is when you then put them into a ball, so we got a new fork here because the other one's got some potato on it, so it's sticky. I'm going to flour the fork, and I'm going to take one of these little balls in my one hand. I'm going to roll it, basically just put my thumb down, and I'm going to roll it down the fork, and it's going to come off in like a little, piece of gnocchi with the little rivets in it. Now, some people say the rivets are just for look, presentation. Others say it helps to collect the sauce in those little rivets. I don't know. Who knows either way. I like it for presentation at least. But if you hadn't pre-rolled them into little balls like I did, it just makes it a little bit harder to kind of see how it like maybe breaks apart a little bit. I don't like that. So I take the extra time to do the ball first and then just, again, roll it down. This part take a little practice for some newbies, but you'll get it. The one side will be where your thumb was and the other side will be the little rivets, and there's a perfect looking little gnocchi. So that's more or less the process. Now, what I like to do, if you're not going to cook these right away, which you're obviously not going to cook them all right away, so what I do is I'll put them on a cookie sheet or something flat where I can lay them out side by side. Let's do that, actually. So, cookie sheet. What I'll normally do is throw a piece of wax paper down, whatever, doesn't really matter, and I'm just going to put these on here, and when I fill up a full tray, I'm going to put them in the freezer, and I'm going to freeze them like a little flash freeze kind of thing. And I do that because if I don't and I throw these all into a Ziploc bag just on top of each other, they're gonna form together as one massive ball, and you're not going to cook them. So again, if you're not going to cook these right away, put them flat like this, freeze them until they're hard, and then when they're hard, throw them into a Ziploc, and then you can freeze them for use later. When you're actually cooking them, you want to bring a large pot to boil. A little salt in there is fine. And when it comes to a boil, you drop these little guys in. If they're fresh like this, sometimes they're going to stick to the bottom right away, so you kind of want to do like a little spoon around to get them, softly get them off of the bottom. And then when they float, they're pretty much done. You can let them go a little bit longer than when they hit the top of the water from float, but you don't want to let them go too long because they're sort of delicate when they're fresh like this, and even when they're coming out of the freezer, they might explode. Like if you're boiling them too long and it looks like there's pieces scattering throughout the pot, that's normal, but you don't want the entire pieces all falling apart. So, get a slotted spoon and just kind of ladle them out and put them into a bowl of sauce or however you're going to serve them. So, all right, that's pretty much it. Hopefully I covered everything and I didn't go off on too many rambling tangents. And I will see how this looks later.